Hi, this is Sara Abrons, Executive Editor of Rave Publications, and I'm here at the end of day one at AVEC 2019 here in beautiful New Orleans. And I'm here with AVIXA's finance guys, Sean Wargo, Senior Director of Market Intelligence, and Peter Hansen, Economic Analyst. How are you guys today?
Good. How are you today, Sarah?
I'm great. I sat through your earlier session on economic outlook for ProAV worldwide, and I thought it was super interesting, so I wanted to talk to you both a bit about and get some of the highlights of what you were talking about earlier. So can you tell me a little bit about an overview sort of the economic outlook for ProAV in the coming years, this year?
Sure. So one of the things we've been talking a lot about is we have a strong industry because we have so much diversity in it. So we tell that story a lot of different ways. All of that leading to us being able to continue to grow, even despite, say, some concerns in recessionary threats, et cetera. And a lot of that comes down to geographic. So AV is everywhere in sense of markets across the world that are adopting it, vertical markets, so where the product's ending up, solution sets, what we are selling into those vertical markets, and then underlying technologies just continue to improve. So you add up all of that kind of diversity element, and that spells a nice strong growth trajectory for us that looks to be about twice GDP. So that's kind of the context we've been talking a lot about. Not bad to be an industry that is 2 times GDP. Certainly a great place to be
Definitely not.
having a business these days.
And since you went ahead and brought it up, obviously a big concern right now is the perhaps concerns with a potential recession. Peter, you had a few thoughts on that. Why don't you tell us earlier what you had to say about that?
Yeah, so if we're honest, there is a chance of recession in the coming 12 to 15 months. It's bigger than I would like to see, but the way I say it's not time to panic. Our best sort of economic models say that the chances are about maybe 1 in 3 of a recession by the end of 2020. So we'd encourage businesses to plan, thinking about diversity of revenue streams, as Sean mentioned, being good for your growth, good for your security. I would also mention adaptability, especially if you can adapt rapidly in the face of an economic shock. It's going to affect some sectors of the economy more than others. And if you can pivot to find those pockets of continued growth and strength, that's how you're going to maintain your sales revenue, even if there's a bit of a downturn.
And obviously the last recession we went through was quite a difficult one, 2008. But that doesn't mean, every recession is not that bad. There's not going to be necessarily, huge, devastating economic downturn. Even if there is a recession, it's not the end of the world.
Right. They call the 2008-2009 recession the Great Recession for a reason. I mean, that one stuck out. We've had, I'd have to double check the numbers, but double-digit recessions between the Great Depression and the Great Recession, and none of them got any kind of title like great. Some of them were only just a few tenths of % off of GDP. Back-to-back quarters of GDP contraction means recession, so it's just a binary, and it has a lot of space where you could be called a recession, and the next one could be big. It's I'm not ruling it out. You can't know the unknowns. But there's also a very real chance that it's quite a different recession. I mean, historically, empirically, most recessions are a lot better for businesses than the most recent one. So lots of reasons to feel maybe not 100% secure, but that your business can probably weather whatever storm may or may not come. Probably won't come, but could come in 2020, by the end of next year.
Well, just because there is a recession doesn't mean it's another 2008, basically.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. It could be very small. You might not even have to adjust any major business decisions. You might just keep things a little steady for a few months, and that's enough.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is the more focused a firm is, the more, say, vulnerable you are. So if you're business of a certain type, let's say you do only new construction, you're focused on corporate projects, you're not as diversified in terms of your service elements. You're more of a, say, simple installation, those kinds of projects. That certainly makes you more vulnerable than if you're starting to look at some of the growth areas, whether it's hospitality or healthcare or some of these other markets, which recessions are not even in their impact. They do tend to affect markets differently. And so it's about kind of looking at where there is those vulnerabilities, aligning that with your own business and saying, hey, I need to maybe start to do some networking outside of my normal corporate kind of client base, or look at maintenance versus refurb kinds of projects. So there's a lot of ways to approach it, for sure.
And Peter, you said something interesting before we got on camera about maintenance being the best way to kind of recession-proof. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
Yeah, so the one way I think I've put it before is that broken system needs to be fixed no matter what's happening in the economy. So new construction, these are capital expenditures related projects, and that is based off of both optimism and profits. And those two things are scarce in a downturn.
And they can be put off and delayed.
Right, you know, okay, I think we're gonna make money, but I'm not sure, so I'm gonna not make this big investment until I feel better. But all the things that we need to do to keep our business running, these operating expenditures, those are gonna continue because you need to have functional unified communications systems to be able to communicate among all your branches. So if that breaks down, you gotta fix it so that you can just keep that basic business going, even if you're not expanding because of the negative economic climate. So maintenance will stay strong no matter what the conditions are.
And based on your research, what are the vertical markets and the types of solutions that you think are going to help integrators and our industry make it?
Yeah, so there's the traditional markets that we've served throughout the years. So everybody kind of points to corporate with office space, et cetera, as kind of lifeblood. Same thing with higher education. So classroom, it's one of the more evolved marketplaces. You tend to have dedicated expenditure, part of operational expense. It's kind of built in that AV has to support. So that's still there and it is still growing, but those two sectors are seeing much smaller expected growth as we go forward. You have other markets that are, say, let's call them non-traditional, in that AV is a newer part of the infrastructure. So that's going to be even hospitality to some extent in lobbies. You've got healthcare too, with patient centers and the front end kind of patient experience, even in, let's say, patient care facility. So diagnostic rooms, treatment rooms, all that sort of operating centers. While it's a bit more specialized technology, and therefore requires a little bit more specialized knowledge, that actually is the market we're seeing some of the highest % growth in a compound annual basis going forward. So it's time, certainly, as you look at, well, in any period, it's always good to look at how I might diversify myself, but certainly now is a great time to be thinking some storm clouds ahead. Maybe that's a market where I start developing some capability, some vendor support, client base, all that kind of stuff. But gosh, you can almost pick your point of entry, pick your different area of interest these days, because we see opportunities in transportation hubs, in sports venues, in museum, in corporate still, but so many different places, and I think that's a great story to be able to tell. We like to say AV is everywhere. So,
and to tease a little bit of upcoming research, the subject of vertical markets and their vulnerability to recession is going to be the subject of the next quarterly meta report coming out in February. So in terms of specifically what vertical markets might be a more safe harbor in a downturn, we're going to have be developing some really good answers on that over the coming months and then publishing in February. So something to look forward to.
Okay. Switching gears just a little bit, you also talked about different areas of the world and how they're seeing sort of different technology growth. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, historically we've talked about this coming day in which APAC would eclipse the Americas. The Americas has been traditionally the largest market for ProAV solutions, thanks to just years and years of compounding annual growth in their own GDP. That starts to catch up. So now in 2019, we are seeing the first year in which APAC as a region is larger than the United States. That's led by several things. Certainly it's corporate infrastructure, conferencing, collaboration, but we're seeing a tremendous interest in digital signage over there as a solution area, security and surveillance, life safety sorts of technologies as well. All that's kind of fueling that market in a big way. To now make it the largest in the world. EMEA still chugs along as a region, has some other macroeconomic challenges kind of facing it, but is a much more mature market too. So you kind of expect a little bit more moderate growth in those areas, but still plenty to talk about in any one of those spaces in terms of opportunities to go after. Yeah.
Okay, and recession fears aside, what are some of the biggest concerns that the AV market has today, and what kind of research is AVIXA doing to kind of help them out in those areas?
I'd have to point to probably the biggest that we hear the most about is resource availability. So the fact that we are a successful industry, lots of project work to be done, but it is a specialized skill set. And so it is hard to find enough staff to support the project load that a lot of these companies face. So some of that is on us as an industry association to try to help generate interest in AV as a career path. Through our foundation, we do a lot of outreach to high school and college to do that. But it's even just how do companies compete for resource on the market. So we've done some research in that area too to kind of see how do they respond to these shortages.
Yeah, with such scarce skilled labor out there, we saw 65% of our insights community. We asked them in the spring, in the past 12 months, has your company had difficulty hiring skilled workers? And 65% said yeah. So you would expect to see wages rising rather sharply with that, especially as well, like in the U.S. Our AV Insights community is global, but in the U.S. we have historically low unemployment, but wages have been pretty flat, around 2%, give or take in ProAV, 3%-ish in the overall U.S. market.
Kind of an interesting economic enigma.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's definitely a contradiction. The former chair of the Federal Reserve, Chair Yellen, has called it a puzzle. We wrote a meta report and called it the wage puzzle, and we looked at the ProAV side of this wage puzzle, and we asked these business leaders, what have you done to address this issue of not being able to find skilled workers? And they told us that they preferred to spend extra time and money searching and also accept less skilled workers and then train them up internally rather than offering substantial wages to sort of outbid their competitors. Valid strategies, absolutely. One implication, if all the businesses are saying no, I'm not going to offer big raises, I'm just going to bring in slightly less talent, or not less talented, but less skilled workers, that could mean that it'd be relatively easy for a business to say, hey, look, no one else is offering big wages. It's not no one else, but less people than we might expect. So it would be relatively easy to then outbid the market. But of course, it's very, very difficult. I mean, there's so much that goes into workforce management. So it's not so simple as, okay, wages are going slow, I need skilled workers, I'll just throw some more money at the problem in terms of actual salary as opposed to search process and training and solve it that easy. It's not that easy, but it is something that businesses could consider given the thrust of all businesses in the market.
Well, thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate your time here today. It's great to talk to both of you.
Yeah. Great talking with you, Sarah.
If industry members want to learn more about what we've talked to here today, where can they get that information?
Yeah, I definitely encourage you to come to our site. So avixa.org, there's some pages there, insights /market intel. But if you go through the top navigations on our site, you'll be able to get some more information about the various report offerings we have. As Peter mentioned, we've got a macroeconomic series that's made exclusively available to our members. We also have some more paid engagement type research on industry sizing, which we call our IOTA reports. And then lastly, we have more of a vertical market focus series called More that they can learn about on those pages.
Okay. Thanks very much. Look forward to hearing more about your market research.